stern warning from Governor Hogan as COVID-19 cases among young people spike at an alarming rate. The key coronavirus numbers we're watching are going in the wrong direction for the second straight day. It's not a trend, but we should be concerned about it. WJZ is live this morning. Amy Kawada with the very latest from the governor. Amy.
Max, Governor Hogan wants to remind us this virus is not behind us and is urging young people to avoid large gatherings like crowded bars and house parties, saying they're not only putting themselves at risk, but also their loved ones. Coronavirus cases among young people in Maryland have skyrocketed. Governor Hogan urging people to get tested.
The positivity rate among Marylanders under the age of 35 is now 83% higher than Marylanders who are 35 and older. And an increasing number of COVID-19 cases have been connected to noncompliance with public health requirements.
The governor pushed local leaders for enforcement of mask wearing in bars and restaurants so they don't have to close.
Some of them were completely, blatantly not following the rules. We're really concerned about our small business owners. We're concerned about those people who work in those restaurants. We want to get people back to work, we want to get our economy, and we want to keep people safe. So at this point, we're trying to crack down on the bad apples without killing the entire industry and all those folks that work there and causing more unemployment.
Teachers unions are pushing the governor for online-only instruction to start the new school year. Prince George's County is doing just that and will not have in-person class until February.
I really do think many people would love to see the kids get back to school. I certainly would. But I also don't want to send kids back to school if it's going to cause major issues.
Until we can get a proven response to the coronavirus, it is reckless to ask parents to return their children to school buildings.
The surge in coronavirus cases has not hit Maryland as hard as states to the south and west, but hospitalizations have risen for 2 straight days. The state is also seeing more than 700 new cases for the past 2 days. And if you've traveled out of state recently, Governor Hogan wants to remind you to get tested immediately. Live this morning, I'm Amy Kawada for WJZ.
Amy, thank you. We're learning a little more about some of the people testing positive for coronavirus. An employee at Arundel County's Odenton Library has COVID-19. The person was at the library last Friday. If you were in contact with that employee, the health department will call you. The library will stay open. And the North Arundel Aquatic Center is closing for 2 weeks after someone tested positive. Staff will deep clean the center. If you were there between July 7th and the 14th and have any symptoms, the health department suggests you get tested. While waiting for results, they also suggest a self-quarantine. The nationwide spike of coronavirus continues. More than 67,000 cases were reported in just 24 hours. The total number of confirmed cases in the country is approaching 3.5 million. More than 137,000 people are already died. In Florida, infections are up by more than 100,000 in a little over a week. The country's largest retailer, Walmart, now says it will start mandating masks for customers in all of their stores. And several states, including Alabama, are also issuing orders requiring face coverings. A new study done at UMBC shows a majority of Asian Americans have experienced racial discrimination because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The researchers focused on Chinese American families and their experiences with racial discrimination between mid-March and the end of May. 75% of people said they witnessed discrimination on a weekly or monthly basis.
Heard families in our sample and our study talk about being shouted at, told to go back to their country, told that they were the source of the virus.
More than half of those surveyed agreed Americans believe Chinese people and culture were a threat to public health. The discrimination is also having an impact on anxiety and depression. 50% of children surveyed said they were worried about being targeted. The Baltimore City Council meets to discuss the general election in fall in hopes of avoiding the problems seen during the primary election. Here's Kelsey Kushner.
Baltimore City Council President Brandon Scott is raising concerns over the upcoming election. Wednesday, in a virtual meeting, the Legislative Investigations Committee held an oversight hearing on the Board of Elections to ensure their preparedness for the general election on November 3rd. Scott says after the mistakes in the primary, he's concerned the city's not ready.
We had some hiccups during that election.
Earlier this month, Governor Larry Hogan requested all eligible voters be mailed an application to request an absentee ballot. But Scott says instead Instead, every eligible voter should receive an absentee ballot in the mail. In a letter to the governor, he says forcing Marylanders to submit multiple mailings so that they can exercise their right to vote by mail will lead to unnecessary confusion and reduce voter participation. Some say they agree with Scott.
But I do think it could be confusing because now we get something that's really a request for a ballot. When you might think that it's really a ballot.
Scott says he's also concerned about in-person voting during a pandemic. State Elections Administrator Linda Lamone says the Board of Elections is still working to find voting centers large enough to comply with social distancing.
We're finding that a lot of the private facilities are going to decline to allow us to use their facilities in November.
But whether it's in person or by mail, some voters say they just want to make sure it's done right.
I think it shouldn't matter, as long as they have it working sufficient.
Now, Lamone says that they still do not have any concrete plans. She says they still need to figure out money, staffing, and location. Reporting at City Hall, Kelsey Krishner for WJC.